The dust never really settled in the west, it only changed direction. When the small wagon finally crested the last hill, the world below looked less like a destination and more like something forgotten by time itself. Broken Creek Ranch stretched across the valley in uneven patches of dry grass, wooden fences leaning like tired men, and a main house that looked as if it had survived too many winters out of stubbornness rather than strength. She stepped down from the wagon slowly, holding a worn leather bag that contained everything she owned. There was no grand farewell behind her, no family waving from a porch, no city lights fading in the distance. Just silence and the long road she had already traveled to get here. The paper in her hand had been simple. Cook needed. Honest work. Room provided. It had sounded like salvation at the time. Now, standing in front of Broken Creek Ranch, it felt more like a question she had not fully understood. A wind swept across the land, carrying the smell of dry earth and wood smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a lone horse neighed, restless and thin. The ranch was not empty, but it felt abandoned in spirit, as if everyone here was waiting for something they did not believe would come. The man who had hired her was waiting near the porch. He was older, shoulders heavy with the weight of many responsibilities and too little hope. His hat was worn at the edges, and his eyes carried the tired kind of kindness that only comes from trying too hard for too long. "You must be her," he said simply. She nodded. "I came for the cook position." A pause followed, not suspicion exactly, but caution, as if he was measuring whether she truly belonged in a place like this. "You're early," he said finally. "Most folks who answer that notice don't make it this far." "I don't have anywhere else to go," she replied, not as a plea, but as fact that seemed to satisfy him more than anything else could. He led her inside the ranch house. The interior was modest, rough-hewn wood, a long table scarred by years of meals, arguments, and exhaustion. The kitchen was small but functional, the kind of space where survival mattered more than comfort. A kettle sat half-filled near the stove, and a stack of unwashed dishes told its own quiet story. "This place runs on routine more than money," the ranch owner said. "We don't have much, but we share what we've got." She placed her bag on the counter and took in everything carefully, the cracks in the walls, the patched window, the faint smell of cattle and dust that never fully left the air. "Who else works here?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "A few hands. Not many stay long these days." That answer said more than he intended. Outside, she could hear movement, boots on wood, the low murmur of voices, the creak of saddle leather. The ranch hands were watching her arrival from a distance, curious but guarded. People here didn't greet change with excitement. They greeted it like a storm might greet the horizon. She rolled up her sleeves anyway. "I'll need flour, salt, and whatever you've got left for meals," she said, already shifting into work mode as if that alone could anchor her here. The ranch owner gave a faint, tired smile. "You'll find we don't waste much around here. Not food, not time, not trust." That last word hung in the air longer than the others. Trust. As she stepped toward the kitchen, she noticed something else, something unspoken but present in every corner of the ranch. The way conversation stopped when strangers approached. The way the men glanced toward the distant road as if expecting someone to arrive and change everything. Broken Creek Ranch was not just struggling. It was waiting, and whatever it was waiting for, it was not kind. She placed her bag down beside the stove and looked out the small kitchen window. The land stretched endlessly beyond, golden and dry, beautiful in a way that felt indifferent to human struggle. She did not know yet what kind of place she had stepped into, but she understood one thing clearly already. This ranch was not just in need of a cook. It was in need of survival. And survival, she would soon learn, always came with a price. By the second morning, Broken Creek Ranch no longer felt like a place she had arrived at. It felt like a place she had stepped into the middle of a struggle already halfway lost. The kitchen was the first place. She understood the truth. Flour was rationed so carefully it almost felt counted by breath. Coffee was weak, stretched thin like everything else here. Even the firewood beside the stove was split into exact portions, as if every stick carried a cost that could not be wasted. She moved quietly through the kitchen, rolling dough, chopping what little vegetables were available, and trying to stretch meals further than logic allowed. It was not just cooking. It was survival math. Outside, the ranch was already awake before the sun fully rose. Men moved between fences and barns with slow, heavy steps. Horses were brushed but underfed. The cattle in the far fields were fewer than she expected for a ranch of this size, too few, as if something had been steadily taken away over time. When she stepped onto the porch with a tray of bread, she finally heard it clearly. The silence between conversations was not peaceful. It was tense. A young ranch hand leaned against the fence, staring out toward the horizon. He looked tired, but not from work alone. "How long has this place been like this?" she asked him gently. He didn't look at her right away. "Depends." "Who you ask? That bad?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "It used to be worse, then it got better, then it started getting worse again." That answer said everything and nothing at the same time. Inside the main house, the ranch owner was reviewing a stack of worn papers. He didn't notice her at first, and when he did, he quickly tried to hide them beneath a ledger book. But she had already seen enough to understand debts, notices, contracts written in dense legal language that felt designed to confuse more than clarify. "You're trying to hold this place together on paper," she said quietly. He looked up, surprised she had noticed so quickly. "Paper is all we've got left," he admitted. "Land doesn't care about loyalty. Banks don't care about history." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she placed a bowl of food in front of him. "And the land baron?" The moment she said it, something in the room changed. The ranch owner stiffened slightly, as if the name itself carried weight. "Darius Cole," he said after a pause. "Even." The way he said it sounded like a warning. "He's been buying everything around us for years," he continued. "Ranches, water rights, supply routes, piece by piece. Now he's circling Broken Creek like it's the last stone left in the river." She absorbed that silently. "And he wants this place too," she said. The ranch owner nodded slowly. "Not just wants it, expects it." Outside, the wind pushed against the wooden walls of the house, making them creak like something alive under pressure. She could feel it now, not just poverty, not just struggle, but pressure. A slow tightening around everything and everyone here. Later that day, she walked the perimeter of the ranch alone. It was her way of understanding things, seeing how land breathes when no one is watching. The fences were patched in places where wood had been replaced with whatever was available. The barn doors didn't close fully. Even the irrigation lines looked like they were held together by habit rather than maintenance. And yet, there was something else too. They hadn't given up, not completely. Near the stables, she saw a group of workers talking in low voices. When she approached, they stopped speaking immediately, exchanging guarded glances. "You're the cook," one of them said finally. "I am," she replied. Another man smirked faintly. "Never seen a cook inspect fences before." She didn't smile back. "Never seen a ranch survive on broken ones either." That made them quiet, not offended. Interested. Because they knew she was right. As the sun climbed higher, she returned to the kitchen, but her thoughts stayed outside in the land, in the papers, in the unseen force tightening around Broken Creek Ranch. This place was not just struggling to survive. It was being slowly cornered. And somewhere beyond the horizon, someone was making sure it stayed that way. The warning didn't arrive with shouting or gunfire. It arrived the way most threats did in the West, quietly, politely, and dressed like business. It was late morning when the writer came into view. From the kitchen window, she saw him first as a small silhouette cutting across the dry land. A single horse, steady pace, no hurry. That alone was unusual. Around Broken Creek Ranch, anything that moved without urgency usually meant it didn't need to rush because it already knew the outcome. By the time he reached the main yard, everyone had noticed. The ranch hands slowed their work. The sound of hammering stopped. Even the wind seemed to shift, as if giving space to whatever was about to happen. The writer dismounted carefully. He wore a clean coat that didn't belong to ranch work, and his boots looked like they had never stepped in mud. In his hand was a folded envelope sealed with red wax. The ranch owner stepped out onto the porch. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Darius Cole," the writer said calmly. At the name, something subtle passed through the yard like a shared memory. No one wanted to speak aloud. She stayed near the kitchen doorway, watching. The writer continued. "Mr. Cole extends a formal offer for the purchase of Broken Creek Ranch and its surrounding land. The terms are generous. Above market value. Immediate transfer of ownership upon acceptance." He held out the envelope. No one moved at first. Ranch owner descended the steps slowly, as if each one cost him something invisible. He didn't take the envelope immediately. Instead, he asked, "And if we refuse?" The writer's expression didn't change. That was what made it worse. "Then Mr. Cole will proceed through legal channels already in motion," he said. "Water rights review, debt reassessment, supply restrictions. All within standard procedure." Standard procedure. The word sounded too clean for what they implied. A ranch hand muttered under his breath behind her, "That's not procedure. That's pressure." She understood then this wasn't a simple offer. It was a tightening rope disguised as paperwork. The ranch owner finally took the envelope, but he didn't open it. He just held it like it might burn him. "Tell Cole," he said quietly, "this land isn't for sale." The writer gave a small nod, as if he had expected that answer. "Very well," he replied. "Then I advise you to review the consequences carefully." He mounted his horse again and turned without another word, and just like that, he was gone. No drama, no confrontation, only dust in his wake. For a long moment, no one spoke. The ranch owner stood still, looking at the envelope in his hand as if it had become heavier. Finally, he opened it. She couldn't see the contents, but she saw his face change as he read. Not fear exactly, but exhaustion meeting inevitability. He folded the paper again and slipped it into his coat. Inside the kitchen, she returned to her work, but her focus was no longer on food. It was on patterns, systems, pressure points. Later, when he came inside, she didn't wait for him to speak. "What did it say?" she asked. He hesitated. It wasn't just an offer. That alone confirmed what she already suspected. "It's a countdown," she said. He looked at her sharply. "You don't understand how this works out here." She wiped her hands slowly and turned to face him fully. "Then explain it." For a moment, he didn't answer. Outside, the ranch creaked and shifted in the heat. Finally, he spoke. "Darius. Cole doesn't take land," he said. "He surrounds it. Cuts off its options. Makes it so staying becomes harder than leaving." She thought about that. "And when there's nothing left?" He didn't answer immediately. "That's when people sell," he said quietly. Silence settled between them. She looked toward the window again, toward the open land that seemed peaceful only if you didn't understand what was happening beneath it. "So he doesn't force you," she said slowly. "He waits until you collapse." The ranch owner nodded once. "Yes." That single word carried more weight than anything else said that day. Later, she walked alone near the storage barn, thinking through everything she had learned. Broken Creek Ranch wasn't just poor. It was being isolated, step by step, piece by piece, until survival became negotiation. But something didn't sit right with her. If coal was as powerful as they said, why bother with offers at all? Why not simply take it faster? That question stayed with her longer than anything else did as the sun began to lower, casting long shadows over the ranch. She made a quiet decision. This wasn't just a place she had walked into by accident. It was a place caught in a system designed to make resistance feel like failure. And systems like that always had weaknesses if you were patient enough to find them. By the fourth day, she stopped feeling like a visitor at Broken Creek Ranch, not because she was welcomed, but because she had started to understand the rhythm of the place. Every ranch had a rhythm. This one just sounded like something held together with effort. Morning began before sunrise, not because it was efficient, but because stopping felt dangerous. The workers moved through their tasks like people trying not to think too loudly. The ranch didn't have the energy of a home anymore. It had the energy of something being maintained under pressure. In the kitchen, she worked differently now. Not just cooking, observing. She learned what was missing before anyone told her. When flour ran low, she adjusted meals without discussion. When meat was scarce, she stretched broth until it became something else entirely. The men began to notice that no one left the table hungry, even when they had no idea how it was happening. And in return, they started talking more. Not directly to her at first, but near her, as if her presence made silence feel unnecessary. That was when she realized something important. People didn't just reveal problems when they trusted someone. They revealed them when they stopped expecting judgment. One afternoon, while chopping vegetables, she overheard two ranch hands talking near the doorway. "They're still cutting supply routes," one said quietly. "Who?" The other replied, though he already knew. "Coal's people. Trucking companies won't come this far anymore. Says it's not profitable territory." She kept her hands moving, but her attention sharpened. So it wasn't just land. It was access. Another voice joined in. Last month it was the grain supplier. Before that, the blacksmith in town. "They don't need to attack us," the first man said. "They just need to make sure nothing comes in." That was the moment it clicked for her, not emotionally, but structurally. This wasn't a battle. It was isolation. Later that day, she sat with the ranch owner during a quiet moment in the office. He was reviewing ledgers again, though now they looked more like a record of decline than management. "You hear things," he said without looking up. "I listen," she corrected. That made him pause. There was a difference, and they both knew it. She placed a cup of water in front of him. "You're not just losing money. You're losing access. Suppliers, routes, people. Everything is narrowing." He exhaled slowly. "That's what pressure looks like." "No," she said gently. "That's what control looks like." He finally looked at her then properly. "You think you understand what we're dealing with?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "No, but I understand patterns." That word stayed between them. Patterns. She leaned forward slightly. "He's not attacking the ranch directly because he doesn't need to. He's making everything around you less reliable. Eventually, you won't need to be forced out. You'll just run out of options." The ranch owner rubbed his forehead, tired beyond sleep. "That's exactly it," he admitted. "And there's no paper trail you can fight. No law that stops people from choosing not to trade with you." Outside the window, the wind pushed dust across the yard like time moving without permission. She watched it for a moment, then said, "There might be ways to reverse it." He let out a short, skeptical breath. With what? We barely keep the lights on. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she thought about everything she had heard in the past days, the suppliers, the routes, the quiet fear in conversations that stopped when certain names were mentioned. And something else began to form in her mind. Not a solution yet, but a direction. That evening, she stayed late in the kitchen after everyone had left. The ranch was quiet in a way that felt heavier than noise. She cleaned slowly, but her thoughts were not on dishes or firewood. They were on connections. Who spoke to whom? Who depended on what? Who had stopped showing up and why? She realized something simple but powerful. A ranch didn't survive on land. It survived on relationships. And Broken Creek Ranch's relationships were being systematically cut one by one. When she finally stepped outside, the sky was darkening into deep blue. The ranch lights flickered unweakly across the yard. She stood there for a moment, listening, not to sound, but to absence. And in that absence, she began to understand the shape of the fight they were in. It wasn't about strength. It was about who could still reach the world outside. Before the world forgot, they were there. By the fifth day, she was no longer just reacting to Broken Creek Ranch, she was studying it, not like a guest, not like a worker, like someone trying to understand what was quietly being taken apart. The kitchen had become her center of observation. People came in hungry, left a little lighter, and often lingered longer than necessary. Food was no longer just survival, it was trust. And trust, she was beginning to realize, was the only currency the ranch still had in abundance. That morning, she noticed something small that others had stopped seeing: the supply ledger. It sat in the ranch office, thick and worn, filled with it. Entries that told a story no one had been reading properly. She asked for it under the excuse of inventory planning. The ranch owner hesitated, then handed it over without much hope. "Careful with that," he said. "It doesn't change anything." But she didn't agree, because she had started to see what others missed, patterns hidden inside exhaustion. She took the ledger into the kitchen and spread it across the table. Every line item, every supplier, every delay, it all connected in ways that weren't obvious at first glance. Then she saw it. A pattern of withdrawals, not random but coordinated. One supplier stopped delivering grain shortly after another reduced livestock feed. A blacksmith in town stopped repairing equipment just weeks after a freight company restructured their routes. Not coincidence, sequence. Someone wasn't just refusing service. Someone was coordinating silence. She traced her finger down the pages slowly. "This isn't collapse," she murmured to herself. "It's alignment." That was the word that changed everything. Alignment meant intention. She closed the ledger and leaned back in the chair, thinking. If Darius Cole was behind this, then he wasn't just pressuring Broken Creek Ranch directly. He was shaping the environment around it. That meant the ranch wasn't isolated by accident. It was being boxed in deliberately from multiple directions until survival became mathematically impossible. But there was something else hidden inside that realization. If it was coordinated, it could be disrupted. That afternoon, she began asking questions, not loudly, not directly, but carefully. She spoke to the stable boy while preparing feed. She listened to the cook's assistant talk about town deliveries. She casually asked about who used to supply tools before things changed, and slowly, pieces started falling into place. One name kept appearing. A middleman contractor in town who handled multiple routes. A man who adjusted logistics depending on demand. Someone who had quietly stopped servicing Broken Creek Ranch just before other suppliers followed. She didn't accuse. She didn't confront. She just noted. Later that evening, she shared her thoughts with the ranch owner. "This isn't random," she said, placing a small stack of notes on his desk. He looked at them with tired eyes. What is it then? She tapped the paper lightly. A chain, he frowned. A chain of what? Dependence, she replied. And someone is controlling the links. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. Even if that's true, what can we do? We don't have influence. We don't have leverage. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him with quiet certainty. You don't need influence, she said. You need visibility. That made him pause. Explain. She picked up a pencil and began sketching a simple map on paper, the ranch, the town, supply routes, connection points. If everything is being quietly redirected, she said, then the system only works because no one is questioning it. No one sees the pattern as a whole. She circled the center point. If we expose the pattern, it stops being invisible. The ranch owner studied the drawing. And how do you expose something that's designed not to be seen? She looked up. You bring it into the open. Silence followed. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls again, steady and patient. The kind of wind that didn't rush because it didn't need to. Finally, he spoke. That's dangerous, he said. She nodded once. So is waiting until there's nothing left to protect. That night, she stayed longer in the kitchen than usual, but not because there was work left. Because for the first time, she wasn't just trying to keep people fed. She was starting to build something underneath the survival. Something quieter, something structured. A way to fight back without ever lifting a weapon. And in the distance, Broken Creek Ranch still, quiet, cornered, began to feel less like a place waiting to fall, and more like a place being prepared to stand out by the sixth day. The pressure didn't feel like something approaching anymore. It felt like something already present in the air. Broken Creek Ranch still looked the same on the surface sunlight. Over dry fields, cattle moving slowly, workers doing their routines, but underneath it, something had shifted. People spoke a little less freely. Conversations ended a little sooner. Even laughter, when it came, felt careful, like it didn't want to be noticed. She felt it most in the kitchen. Not in the food, but in the mood. The ranch hands still ate. What she prepared still thanked her quietly, but their eyes lingered longer on doors and windows, as if expecting messages to arrive through them. And they did, just not loudly. First came the mail delay. Then the supply confusion. Then the cancellation of a routine equipment delivery that had been guaranteed for months. Each one alone was small. Together, they formed a tightening circle. The ranch owner received another notice that morning. He didn't even open it right away. He just held it in his hand while standing at the kitchen table, staring at it like it had weight beyond paper. You don't need to read it to know what it says, she said quietly. He gave a tired nod, same tone. Different wording. She wiped her hands on a towel and stepped closer. Let me guess. Review of obligations. Reassessment of land value. Pressure disguised as procedure. A faint, almost defeated smile crossed his face. You've learned the language fast. It's not language, she replied. It's repetition. That word again, patterns. He finally opened the letter, scanned it quickly, then placed it down. They're speeding things up, he admitted. Cole's people are pushing harder on the supply side. 2 more vendors pulled out this week. She didn't react immediately, but inside she tracked the escalation. This wasn't random pressure anymore. It was acceleration. As if someone had decided the waiting phase was over. Later that afternoon, she went into town. It wasn't announced. She simply asked for permission to buy basic supplies, and no one questioned it. The ranch hands were too preoccupied, and the ranch owner was too exhausted to argue. But she didn't go just for supplies. She went to observe. The town near Broken Creek Ranch wasn't large, but it was busy enough to serve as a small hub for surrounding lands. Normally, Ranchers would be seen there regularly trading, repairing, negotiating. Now she noticed something missing. Certain familiar faces weren't showing up anymore. At the general store, she overheard fragments of conversation. Didn't take that contract. Heard Cole's company bought their distribution partner. No point servicing out there anymore, not worth the trouble. Each sentence was casual, ordinary, but together they confirmed what she already suspected. The isolation was expanding outward. By the time she returned to the ranch, she had stopped carrying hope and started carrying clarity. That evening, the land baron's presence arrived without physically arriving. It came through the ranch owner's expression when he saw her return. Something had changed. What happened? She asked immediately. He hesitated, then handed her a folded document. This came directly through legal channels, he said. She opened it. It wasn't an offer this time. It was a notice. A structured review of water access rights tied to the region surrounding Broken Creek Ranch. Her eyes moved quickly across the page. They're targeting water now, she said. He nodded slowly. If they control that, nothing grows, nothing survives. She looked up sharply. That's not pressure, that's containment. The ranch owner sat down heavily at the table. Cole is tightening everything. Suppliers, transport, and now water regulation. She folded the document carefully, her mind already moving ahead of the moment. He's removing every alternative, she said. So the only remaining option looks like surrender. The ranch owner rubbed his face. We can't fight legal. Systems we don't control. She didn't agree. Not yet, not fully. Instead, she said something different. We don't fight it head on. He looked at her. Then how? She glanced toward the window, where the ranch stretched out into fading light. By making it visible, she repeated softly. On a level he can't quietly adjust. That night, she stayed up later than usual again. But this time, she wasn't just observing patterns. She was mapping escalation. Every supplier withdrawal. Every delayed delivery. Every legal notice. They weren't separate events. They were steps. And steps meant direction. Darius Cole wasn't just trying to force Broken Creek Ranch into collapse. He was guiding it there in a way that looked natural from the outside, which meant the only way to break it was to expose the design itself. Outside, the ranch wind moved steadily across the land again, but now it didn't feel empty. It felt like something was being prepared, quietly, carefully, like the moment before a system finally realizes it has been understood. The notice for the town meeting didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a stage being set. By the time the sun rose over Broken Creek Ranch that morning, the air already carried a different kind of tension, less about survival, more about consequence. People dressed a little sharper than usual when they went into town. Even the ranch hands spoke in lower voices, as if words themselves might be overheard by the wrong kind of silence. She noticed the ranch owner hesitating near the doorway before they left. This is Cole's territory when it comes to influence. He said quietly, You should stay back. She didn't argue. Not loudly. Instead, she replied, That's exactly why I need to be there. The ride into town was long enough for the wind to settle thoughts into order. Dust rose behind the wagon, trailing like something unwilling to let go. Neither of them spoke much. There was nothing left to explain that hadn't already been understood. When they arrived, the town hall was already filling. It was larger than expected. Wooden beams, wide interior, a raised platform at the front where officials and prominent landowners sat. But what stood out most wasn't the structure. It was presence. Darius Cole hadn't arrived yet, but his influence had. You could see it in the way certain men stood together near the front, in the way conversations stopped when a new person entered, in the way confidence seemed unevenly distributed across the room. And then he appeared. Darius Cole didn't enter like someone arriving at a meeting. He entered like someone confirming ownership of it. Clean coat, calm expression, measured steps. Nothing rushed. Nothing uncertain. He greeted a few people with polite nods, but there was no warmth behind it, only recognition of arrangement. She watched him carefully from the side of the hall. Not FEARFULL. Why? Analytically. This was the center point of everything she had been mapping. The meeting began with formal discussion: land development, regional supply changes, water regulation proposals. Words layered in politeness, each one carefully chosen to sound neutral, but underneath it, she could see the structure. It was not discussion. It was presentation. Cole's proposal was being framed as inevitability. When the agenda shifted toward Broken Creek Ranch, the room subtly changed posture. Papers were adjusted. Chairs straightened. Attention narrowed. A man at the front spoke first. As part of regional development adjustments, he said, certain properties may require consolidation for efficiency and sustainability. Efficiency. Sustainability. Words that sounded harmless when removed from context. The ranch owner stood slightly at that point, but she placed a hand lightly on the table, signaling him to wait. Cole spoke next. We're offering fair valuation and transition assistance, he said smoothly. This is not displacement, it's modernization. A few murmurs of agreement followed. That was the system she had studied, not force, but framing. Not taking. Redefining. She felt the room leaning, slowly but steadily, toward acceptance. That was when she stood up. Not dramatically. Not suddenly, but deliberately. The shift was immediate. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even Cole's gaze moved toward her with measured curiosity, as if she were an unexpected variable in a controlled equation. She walked forward, not to the center. Just enough to be seen. You've been presenting this as efficiency, she said clearly. Her voice didn't shake. But efficiency for who? The room stayed quiet. She continued. You're not consolidating land. You're restructuring access. Suppliers, transport, water rights, each one adjusted until only one outcome remains possible. A few people shifted in their seats. Cole remained calm. And your point is? He asked gently. She met his gaze directly. My point is that this isn't a market adjustment, she said. It's a controlled narrowing. And it only works because each step is treated as unrelated. A pause. Then she placed something on the front table. Her notes. Maps, timelines, supplier records, patterns she had traced quietly over days. I didn't come here to accuse anyone, she said. I came to show sequence. She pointed lightly at the documents. This ranch isn't failing randomly. It's being isolated systematically. And if you look at the full picture instead of the individual steps, the pattern becomes visible. Silence spread through the room, not all at once, but gradually, like understanding. Arriving in pieces, Cole finally stepped forward slightly. And what exactly are you suggesting? He asked, still calm. She didn't look away. I'm suggesting that what you've called natural decline only looks natural when you separate the events, she said. Together they show coordination. A shift moved through the audience, not agreement yet, but attention, and attention was the first crack in control. The ranch owner looked at her, then not surprised anymore, but something closer to recognition. Because for the first time, the room wasn't just listening to authority. It was comparing it. And in that comparison, something had begun to change. The silence after her words didn't break immediately. It stretched. Not empty, but full, like the room itself was thinking for the first time instead of reacting. She stood still near the front table, hands relaxed, eyes steady. No one moved her. No one interrupted. Even the officials who had been nodding in agreement earlier now looked less certain, as if the foundation beneath their assumptions had shifted slightly. Darius Cole remained composed. That was his strength and his warning. He stepped forward slowly, just enough to recenter the room's attention on him. "What you've presented," he said calmly, "is interpretation, not evidence." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried control in its restraint. A few people in the room visibly relaxed at his words, as if returning to familiar ground, but she didn't step back. Instead, she replied, "Then, let's call it what it is: connection. If every supplier withdrawal, every delayed route, every legal pressure point leads back to the same pattern, then it stops being coincidence." A man near the front cleared his throat uncomfortably. Another shifted in his seat. Cole studied her for a long moment. Not anger. Not fear. Assessment. Like she was something unexpected placed into a system he thought he understood. Finally, he spoke again. "You're new to this region," he said, "and you've mistaken structure for manipulation." She almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "No," she replied. "I've seen manipulation. It doesn't announce itself. It hides inside structure." That line landed differently, not loudly, but deeply, because people in the room had lived long enough to recognize when something sounded true, even if it was uncomfortable. The ranch owner, standing behind her, finally spoke. "She's not wrong about what we've experienced," he said carefully. "We've been losing access for months, one service at a time, one supplier at a time. It didn't feel connected until now." A ripple moved through the room. That was the turning point, not her speech, but his acknowledgement. Because authority can resist accusation, but it struggles against confirmation from within. Cole's expression tightened slightly for the first time, not in anger, but in recalibration. He understood what was happening. The narrative was no longer singular. It was splitting, and in that split, control weakened. He exhaled slowly. "This region is evolving," he said finally. "Change creates disruption. Disruption feels personal when it's structural." She responded immediately. "Then transparency shouldn't be a problem." That sentence changed the atmosphere again. Because transparency was not something systems built on quiet coordination welcomed easily. The room stayed quiet. Not hostile, not supportive. Just uncertain. And uncertainty was dangerous for both sides. After a long pause, the meeting adjourned without resolution, but nothing about it felt like an ending. It felt like exposure. Outside the hall, the air was cooler than expected. The dust in the street had settled, but something else had risen in its place. Attention from the town, from the ranchers, from people who had started connecting dots they had ignored for too long. The ranch owner walked beside her in silence. For a while before speaking, "You didn't just speak in there," he said quietly. "You shifted how people see it." She looked ahead. "I didn't shift it," she replied. "I just made it visible." Behind them, the town continued moving, but not in the same way. Conversations were quieter, observations sharper, assumptions less stable. Darius Cole left the hall shortly after, escorted by his usual calm presence. But for the first time, he didn't look like someone controlling the environment. He looked like someone adjusting to it. Back at Broken Creek Ranch that evening, the land felt different, not because anything had changed physically, but because perception had. Workers talked more openly. Questions replaced silence in small corners. Even the ranch itself seemed to breathe differently. Like pressure had eased just enough to notice. She stood near the fence line alone as the sun began to lower. The ranch was still vulnerable, still under pressure. Nothing about its situation had been magically fixed, But something fundamental had shifted. It was no longer invisible. And in the West, invisibility was often stronger than power. Now, at least, it had a name, and names could be challenged. From the distance, the horizon stretched wide and unbroken. But for the first time since she arrived, Broken Creek Ranch didn't feel like it was waiting to disappear. It felt like it was preparing to stand.